Hey guys, welcome to another video. Something slightly different for you today because we are sat here in my office studio area, and we're here to talk about how to get the best from exploring the Somme in a day. I'm going to help give you an idea of the places you can go, the things you can see if you are restricted to one day touring the Somme. I'm hopefully going to give you some tips, tell you the spots to go to, and also give you some key bits of information that will help you whilst you're there at those certain locations. So no messing around, let's get straight into this and let's go and tour the Somme in a day. So I should say a couple of sort of key bits to help you get the best from this video. Of course, I've had to make a few assumptions. I've assumed that you're going to have a car if you are exploring the Somme. You don't have to have a car, you can walk the Somme, but that would be very difficult to do or difficult to see much if you do only have one day. So I'm assuming that you've got a car. I'm also assuming that you're managing to get yourself over to France at a fairly decent time in the morning. That's not hard to do. The Somme is only about an hour and 45 minutes maybe from Calais. So if you cross over on a ferry or the Eurotunnel on the train even quicker with your car, you can be down there fairly early in the day. So to get the best from this itinerary, you would want to try to plan to be at our first location by about 10 a.m. and that's fairly easy to do if you get yourself a decent time ferry or train over to France. Okay, so for our first spot, we are going to stop off at the northern end of the Somme. Now, it's worth noting that there was some fighting a little bit further north than here. There was some diversionary attacks at Gomecourt, but here at Serres, our first location, was the northern section of the kind of Somme Frontline proper, so to speak. What I'm going to suggest here is that you park your car outside the Serres Road #1 cemetery. From here, you can take a fairly easy walk up towards the Thiepval Memorial Park. Now, I probably would say it's about a 10-minute walk, quicker if you're a fast walker, or a bit longer if you want to go at a more leisurely pace. It is on a track, so I would recommend wearing some suitable kind of boots or shoes, and it might make it tricky for people who need access, wheelchairs and stuff like that. This might be a more difficult spot to visit. Unfortunately, some of the Somme areas, of course, are on farmland, and that does make some of it a bit tricky. But from the cemetery there, you're going to take just a short walk up the road and then along a farm track towards the Thiepval Memorial Park. There might be a temptation to drive along this track. I don't recommend that. It is on farmland, and the local farmer there does sometimes get a bit funny if people drive onto the land, whereas he is perfectly fine for people to walk up the track. I've run into him a couple of times myself on the track, and he's a fairly friendly guy, provided you don't go and drive your car across his land. So as you're walking along this track towards the Thiepval Memorial Park, you are there or thereabouts following the British frontline trenches. And this section of the Somme is where a lot of the PALS battalions went into action on the first day of the Somme. As you start heading along the track, you are crossing over a section where the Leeds PALS went over the top on the first day of the Somme. Horus Ises, somebody who we've talked about on this channel, came out of his trench here and moved across no man's land towards Serres and was killed on that first day of the Somme. And we're actually going to get a chance to visit his grave slightly later when we go into the Serres Road #1 cemetery itself. As you move further down towards the memorial park itself, there's some really interesting things you can see here. There's some of the memorials to the different PALS units who attacked here. For example, the Accrington PALS, who had some of the heaviest casualties on the first day of the Somme. They were in the first wave that moved across this piece of land here, attacking towards Serres, and had some devastating casualties. As you explore Thiepval Memorial Park, you can see some of the craters from the artillery that came in on this area. You can see the remains of a British reserve line trench that's just inside the fence along the road edge here. And there's a few other smaller cemeteries you can visit here as well. If you look out towards Serres, you will see the Queen's Cemetery in the middle of the field. That is directly in the middle of what was no man's land. And if you walk out there towards the entrance of the cemetery, you are walking in the footsteps of the men who advanced across that land. And as you get to the cemetery, you are at the point that is pretty much the furthest any of the men managed to get on that terrible day. So I recommend taking the time here to explore the rest of Thiepval Memorial Park, have a look at the memorials, have a wander around the land, and you can just see how torn up it is. And then whenever you're ready, I'd probably suggest an hour or so wandering this area, you can head back down towards where you've parked your car and take a look in the Sayre Road #1 cemetery. This is a really interesting cemetery here, and it's definitely, I recommend, a good spot for your first Commonwealth Graves Commission cemetery on the Somme. Here you will see the graves of some of the men who fell during the attack there on the first day. You're also going to see a lot of unknown soldiers' graves, and that's because this area of the battlefront remained the same beyond the first day of the Somme, which meant some of those casualties laid out in no man's land for quite a long time. That meant that by the time their bodies were recovered, they weren't able to be identified, and that's why a lot of the graves in this area are unknown. There's lots of different graves here you can have a look at. One specific, which I'm going to direct you towards. If you walk up through the cemetery, up into the higher sections, along the back and over to the left, you will find the grave of Horus Ises. He was killed when he was only 16 years old here on the first day of the Somme, and I've done a video specifically about his story, which I really recommend checking out later on. So from here, you're going to head back down to your car. Just a very short drive. We're going to head over to a place called the Sunken Lane, just outside Bowmont, Hamill. Now, to get from place to place, you can do it with maps. There's loads of good kind of local maps, but if you've got any kind of sat-nav, if you've got Google Maps on your phone, Waze, any of those kind of apps, if you just type in Beaumont Hamill, or if you put in Sunken Lane, that itself comes up on a few places, or the Hawthorne Ridge Crater, that's the area you're going to. And as you come down towards Sunken Lane, you can park up on the left. You'll see the big monument there. Just park your car and we're going to have a wander around this area right here. So in this area here, you can see Sunken Lane. That is the main kind of sort of dirt track that runs up with the banks on either side of it. Now, this is an area where the Lancashire Fusiliers moved forwards in the early hours of the morning on the first day of the Somme into this Sunken Lane. So from where you are, Sunken Lane is kind of in the midpoint of what was no man's land. If you stand in Sunken Lane and look back out towards the main road, the British front line was off to your right-hand side, the German front line was off to your left-hand side, up across the hill where we're going to go in just a little while. And Sunken Lane was in the midpoint. Now, the British soldiers moved forwards into Sunken Lane to give them an opportunity to have less ground to cross here towards the German front line when the attack began. And you can stand here, and if you load up on your phone, you can find it on YouTube, there is some video footage of the men in this Sunken Lane. I really recommend, give yourself the experience of standing in the lane, get that little video up on your phone, and you can watch it, the video that was filmed by Geoffrey Maylands of those soldiers in this Sunken Lane. A lot of the men filmed in that video clip were going to move over the top of this lane towards the German lines and would lose their lives. There was an awful lot of casualties again in this area, as there was a lot in the northern section of the Somme. From here you can move around to the Beaumont Hamill British Cemetery, which is just in the kind of field outside the lane, and here you can see the graves of some of the men who've lost their lives in this area. If you look across up the kind of bank on the other side of the road, you can see a group of trees. Those trees are in the Hawthorne Ridge Crater, and I really recommend taking the opportunity to walk up there to the crater. This is a huge hole that was left by a British mine. So the British tunnelled under this position. It was a German stronghold and blew a huge charge, a huge mine, just before the attack here. Now, I've done a video that tells you the full story of this area and what went wrong here, and I recommend you check that out on my channel. I can't tell the full story in this video, but head up there, explore the crater. You can have a look at where the mine crater was blown, and you can also look back across what was no man's land, and you can see the view that the German machine gunners would have had from this area, and you can understand why there were so many British casualties. And again, to get that full story, check out the video that I made about this area here. So from here, you're going to head back down to your car, and we're going to take another short drive round to the Newfoundland Memorial Park. On the route here, your car is probably going to take you up and through Champs and round to the Newfoundland Memorial Park. That is a village that was known as Ocean Villas to the British Tommies who were in that area at the time. You're going to head round to the Newfoundland Memorial Park, and you're going to park up here, and you can go and have a look around. This is a really interesting site. Now, as you walk into the Newfoundland Memorial Park here, you are quite likely to be greeted by one of the young Canadian guides who volunteer and work in this area. They will offer you a tour, and if it's your first time visiting this site, I really recommend taking them up on that tour. If for some reason you don't want to or you don't feel comfortable, they will offer you a little leaflet that directs you to some of the sites around here, and I really recommend taking that, because as you explore this area, the guide will tell you some fascinating stories about what's happened here, and if you don't want the guide, the little leaflet that they'll give you will help you do that as well. This is a site on the Somme where you can see some of the best preserved trenches, and there are British line trenches here, and there's also German line trenches here. It's one of the fairly unique places where you can really see the British line trenches, what was no man's land, all torn up with crater holes and shell holes, and then you can see the German front line. I really recommend taking the time to explore this area. Do the lap around the Memorial Park, and you can really see all the different places. You can see the St John's Road Reserve Trench, where men of the Newfoundland Regiment had to actually come out of their reserve trench behind the British front line due to the communication trenches being so clogged up with casualties. That meant they moved across high ground before they even got to their own front line, and they suffered terrible, terrible casualties here on the first day of the Somme. And again, I've made a video specifically about this area. I recommend checking that out before your trip to give you the best idea of what you're going to see. The other good thing here about Newfoundland Memorial Park is they have a little visitor centre. There's some really great stuff to see in there as well. It's very interesting, to go take the time to have a look in there as well. And this is the perfect opportunity for a toilet stop. They have some toilets in there that you can use, and so I recommend doing that as well, because by this point of the day, we probably are moving into the late morning. You've been out and about walking around for a few hours, and there is a very good chance that you will need to use those toilets. So you've probably had a fairly busy morning by this stage, and here's where I'm going to recommend you take yourself a little bit of a break for lunch. It's only going to be about 10 minutes drive down towards Albert, Albert as it was known by the British troops in the area at the time. And in the kind of sort of northern end of Albert, not in the centre of the town, there's lots of little lunch spots there. There's a little shop where you can get some sandwiches and stuff. There's a pizza vending machine. There's a McDonald's if you'd like that. And there's lots of other bits as well. If you want a more leisurely lunch, you can head into the centre of the town, and there's all different restaurants down there as well. Of course, that will take a bit more time, and it might mean that your afternoon schedule is a little bit more squeezed, but you've got a chance here to get some refreshments. You can put some fuel in your car if you need to. You can get yourself some lunch, get yourself a coffee, refuel, and be ready to head out for another busy afternoon on the Somme. Okay, so our first stop of the afternoon is going to be the Thiepval Memorial. I really recommend including this into your visit to the Somme. This is the memorial to the missing that sits on top of the hill there at Thiepval. Now, there are the names of more than 72,000 men on this memorial, men who are missing from the Great War, meaning they have no known grave. It's a really moving sight, and one that I recommend you really take the time to explore. Have a look at the panels, read the names, and as you start to have a look around here, you really do realise just how many names there are on that memorial. And remember, each one of those names means loved ones or a family who did not know what had happened to their son, their husband, their brother. And that is a tragic part of the Great War, that so many men were just missing, were lost and had no known grave. And this is the memorial to the missing at Thiepval. I've done a video on this site as well, which you can check out before you go there to give you a bit of idea of maybe some of the specific names you might want to look out for. But I really recommend taking the time to explore this site. It is one of the most moving sites along the Somme, and really is a must-see if you're going to go and explore the area. Okay, from here we're going to take another little drive down to the Loch Nar Crater. Now this is a really interesting site that you can go and see on the Somme. It is another huge crater hole. Now we've already seen the one over near Bowmont, Hamill. This one in lots of ways is more impressive. It is a huge mine crater. And this again was blown just under the German front line near La Boisselle. The British tunnelled under this position and set off this mine charge just before the attack on the first day of the Somme to take out a strong German position here. Now this was actually one of two very large mines that were blown in this area, but the other crater has since been filled in. I really recommend taking the time here. There's some information panels you can look at as you explore the Loch Nar Crater. You can walk around the edge and look at some of the information there. It tells you a little bit about some of the tunnelling companies who had a torrid time digging the tunnels underneath this battlefield, and some of the story that came with them. Now I actually don't have a video on this site, so I can't point you towards it, but there will be one hopefully coming fairly soon. But there's plenty of other videos and information on YouTube and places that you can find out if you do want to learn a bit more about this area before you come here. But this is the Loch Nar Crater. From here you're going to get back in your car. You can park your car right by the crater here for this one, so there's not really any walking involved, and we're going to head off to our next spot. Okay, so to round off our afternoon, we're going to head down into the further southern section of the British part of the Somme battlefield. And I'm going to recommend here that you park your car just near the Devonshire Cemetery, just outside Metz. Now, this is a section of the Somme where there was a bit more success than we saw in the northern section. If you park your car by the Devonshire Cemetery and walk around and up the steps into the cemetery itself, you'll see there's not a huge amount of graves here. Well, where you are stood and where you're looking here is what was the British Frontline trench. And just as you approach the cemetery on the left, you'll see a very moving panel that tells you that the Devonshires held that trench, that they still hold it today. That's because the men who advanced across this land and lost their lives in the attack were brought back and buried here in their own frontline trench. Now, whilst there was success in this section of the Somme, of course there were still lots of casualties that were lost along the way. Now I recommend taking the time to look around and explore some of the graves, but there's a couple of notable ones that you can take a look at here. Now I've done a video about this area and about this cemetery, so again I recommend checking out that video before you go. But a couple of the graves that I'm going to direct you towards here, first of all, is Captain Duncan Martin. Now, he was a captain here who attacked in this section, who lost his life on the first day. And as you'll see if you go back and watch my video, he had some concerns about the attack here. He was worried about the position of German machine guns, and in fact he created a model of the ground around here to try to kind of demonstrate to some of his more senior commanders the concerns and the thoughts that he had about this land. The decision was made that they were still going to attack here, and what he predicted was sadly the case. A lot of men did lose their lives in this attack, including him, and his grave is here in the Devonshire Cemetery. Another grave that I'm going to direct you towards is that of William Null Hodson. So he was a poet before the Great War and had poems he wrote during the Great War. And in fact, he wrote a poem just a few days before he was going to lose his life here. And it is thought that he almost had a premonition of his own death in that poem. And I won't include the poem in this video because I wouldn't want to spoil the other video that you can go and watch that I've made about this area. But I do include it there, and I recommend going to watch that. The very moving story of both Hodson and Martin, who lay here in the Devonshire Cemetery. As you walk back round to your car, in front of you here you can see the valley that was no man's land. This was the land that the British troops had to attack across here. And you see by the lay of the land, the German machine guns were up on the banks ahead of you. And so you can really see the challenge these guys had. It's incredible actually that they did have success here and they did take their objectives. And another section where that happened as well was just on the other side of Metz, or further east, and we're going to drive round now to the Danzig Alley British Cemetery. So again here you can park up just outside the cemetery, and as you stand here and look out from the front of the cemetery to the fields on the other side of the road, you are seeing the piece of land that the 22nd Manchesters attacked across on the first day of the Battle of the Somme. With them was Captain Charlie May. Now, we've talked about Charlie on this channel before and have done a video about the 22nd Manchesters. Definitely recommend checking that one out. Now, Charlie May kept a diary through the course of the war. It's available online, or you can buy it on Amazon. Really recommend get hold of that or get it on your phone before you go out, because to be able to stand on the bank looking across that hill and read the words that Captain Charlie May wrote in the last few days before he made his attack across this piece of land really is a moving experience. And after that you can walk round into the Danzig Alley cemetery itself, and you can see the grave of Captain Charlie May, who lost his life here leading the 22nd Manchesters on the successful attack on the first day of the Somme. Where this cemetery lays is roughly the position where the Danzig Alley German trench was. The men who lost their life here were buried in this German trench, which had been captured by the British, and that is why the cemetery sits here today. There's lots of other graves here that I recommend you explore. I've actually got some other future videos coming fairly soon where I talk about another fairly unique grave that's in this cemetery. So keep an eye on that one for the channel coming up soon. I don't want to give that one away just yet. Now, I think that probably just about rounds off your day on the Somme. That's a fairly busy day. If you are staying the night and you've got the opportunity to explore for a second day, well, I've got some good news for you, because the next video that comes up in a few days on the channel is going to be my recommendation on what you would do if you had a second day to explore the Somme. So if you're going to go stay the night, you'll probably be staying somewhere around Albert or maybe in one of the local villages. And I've got some thoughts on that which I can help you with, which we'll talk about in the next video. If not, hopefully this time of day, you've still got time to get yourself back over to Calais, get yourself on a later train or a ferry back home. And I really hope that this video helps you to get the best from one day exploring the Somme. If you did find it useful, I'm going to ask you guys to do all the usual stuff for me. Make sure you hit the like button, make sure you comment below and let me know what you think. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. If you like my channel and you'd like to support me, you can do that via Patreon. And we've also now set up a Buy Me a Coffee page. So if you would like to buy me a coffee, any funds that I make through Buy Me a Coffee or through Patreon will all come back to funding the channel. I don't intend on taking any profit from those things. I'll put them all back into the channel to carry on making great videos for all of you guys. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy your day touring the Somme, and I'll see you on the next one.